rigging this room up to where
I'm live now. Hey, that's okay. Can you thank you so much. Yeah, we should though.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that. Some technical difficulties here. We're trying to have a better view for you guys to look at, talking about the adrenal fatigue and relationship with inflammation, but I think we're ready to go. Last week was obviously lots of fun with having the camera flip backwards, not once, but twice. That was stressful, and it resulted in the crack. And so now we're trying to do this a little bit more detailed. So now what we're looking at is, I see it's me, it's my glare. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about the role of adrenals when it comes to inflammation. And again, usually my intro is, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen, and I am what I call the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, where we look at the role that adrenals are playing in your poor health, and looking at it in terms of being exhausted and whether or not you're stressed out. What does stressed out mean? It means that you don't handle stressors the same way. So you're exhausted, you're burnt out, you can't focus, you can't concentrate. But more at a fundamental level is that your body can't regulate itself perfectly. So that means your blood pressure can fall really quickly if you stand up and you get lightheaded. Or you go to the beach, I like to use that example a lot. You go to the beach and it's just too hot, you can't cool down, it's not fun to be there. Or you go to cold weather and it's really cold and you're just way more sensitive than you've ever been, and it's unenjoyable. Not that I'm talking about things personally, but I don't like to go back to Toronto in the wintertime on purpose. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to say who I'm talking about though. So anyways, what I'd want to talk about today is about inflammation and the role that plays. And I'm listening to a lot of really inspirational health talks by Dr. Robert Marshall, and he was really an awesome guy. He just passed away not too long ago, and he was a biochemist of the body, is what he called himself. And his story was really interesting. He had a lawsuit where he used the seed money to start that PRL company, and what that resulted in is he was teaching a lot about the benefits of how he saved his life from the lawsuit in terms of a bunch of people, and I don't know the details 100%, so now the time my story comes around, it's probably completely different. But I believe, I didn't put intel in it, I didn't investigate exactly what it is. So anyways, I know it's something along the lines where a lot of people that took tryptophan from a tryptophan supplier ended up dying from that batch. And it's a lawsuit, you can check it out, and he was the only survivor, and he used that money to create PRL labs. And what really made it stand out was the fact that he used resonance in terms of living food sources and minerals and just key concepts of health. And so he's influenced me a lot, and I'm really excited to talk to you about the things that I'm learning from him, and so I can help you guys as well. And so it has a lot to do with one of the things that he reminds us upon is that the adrenals have three main functions. They like to reduce inflammation, of course, is very, very important. The adrenals will also help with your water content, and when your water content is not balanced, that's obviously going to impact the minerals, and that's going to impact a lot of the balancing of your main systems. So that goes a lot deeper, and I can go a lot more into that in terms of how profound that is, because when the adrenals are off and they are tired is a way of defining, are they regulated in terms of their rhythm? Are they producing enough good quality stuff? Are they getting signaled properly? Are they being involved in whatever way they can be involved in? And so when we speak about it controls the water content, then obviously that's pretty important for regulating the behind the scenes things that we're talking about, like making sure that you can cool yourself down when it comes time to going to the beach. or, you know, being able to do the harder exercises. And if you went into a sauna, for example, and you went in there and you pushed it too hard, what happens is you don't have the raw materials on board to deal with that depletion, and the adrenals kind of orchestrate that whole thing. So it's kind of naive to say something is adrenal fatigue is the adrenals are tired and asleep on the job and not doing anything. What they're doing is they're working harder behind the scenes, and they're tired in that way, and they don't regulate properly. And then at some point they sort of, you know, bite the farm, if you will, and they're exhausted, but they still mount some kind of impact and some kind of defense. So back to Dr. Robert Marshall. So he was saying the important thing about the adrenals is they balance inflammation, and they help secrete hormones that are going to reduce the inflammation in the body. And that's really, really important too, obviously, because why do we get inflamed? And that's what we're talking about tonight. And so when we talk about inflammation, we're talking about the adrenals having to be signaled to be able to release cortisol to reduce the inflammation. And that's really important because we got to think about it at the 30,000 view feet too, where the adrenals are really signaling a lot of stuff, and they get tired and they get overwhelmed, and it is all about stress. That's what it's about. But when they get overwhelmed, it goes deeper than that. Mineral content goes down, and now all of a sudden minerals are not getting into the cells. We're depleted. We're getting rid of them more than we're bringing them on, and that impacts your pH levels, which brings it lower because we use our minerals to balance that pH. If it goes too low, why would it go low? Because it needs to have a thriving environment for pathogens to live in, and they like an acidic environment. And there's a difference between acidic environment for pathogens to live in and acidity to break down your foods in your gut lining, in your stomach. Two different concepts. You guys get that mixed up all the time. And you think, okay, well, is it supposed to be acid or not acid? I want to make sure I have enough acid to break down my foods, but then I know there's a proton pump inhibitor that can reduce my acid because it's too high. And then you're just telling me acid is great for a pathogen to live in low acid, but you said it's too high. Now do I got to go too low? Like, what do I do? I mean, I'll get a lot of that. And what we're talking, I mean, give me a like if you like that and agree with that, because I'd like to know if that's the case. I think it happens a lot in terms of, am I acidic? Do I need to have enough acidity to break down foods? Is the acidity good or bad? What's the difference between too low and too high? Stuff like that. I think that goes on a lot. And I think what happens is we don't secrete enough stomach acids to break down our foods. And when we don't break down our foods properly, they sit there and ferment and get refluxive, and they feel reflux. And that's a sort of inflammation. That's a sort of inflammation that we get every day because we're not secreting and breaking down our foods. And if we're not breaking down our foods, how are we absorbing the nutrients? And if we're not absorbing the nutrients, how are we going to fight stress? And how are the adrenals going to balance your water content and your minerals? How is it going to do a good job like that? It's not. And then what happens? What's the consequence of that? Is just we fix the adrenals? No, a lot of people have got past the gatekeeper. So the adrenals are the gatekeeper, and they don't let people to get into the castle. So you can fix the door, but there's people that are in the castle. And so now you got to go after those guys. And that's, you know, what did we just talk about? Pathogens. We talked about, you know, foods that can be infected, or foods that have, you know, bacteria or mold or viruses, or foods that have chemicals and pesticides and residues, or foods that have no minerals from the grounds that we eat. This is what's going on in our life, and it's kind of scary. You're right, it is scary, but it's also, knowledge is power, and you can really take hold of your health if you dig deep and you want it big enough to want it. And so that means that you have to, you know, play by the rules, so to speak. And common sense says that if something got in, you got to get it out. But at what point do I get it out? Do I rush right in there and try to get it out and cause my body to go overwhelm and already deplete the minerals that I'm already depleted on? Because, yeah, that's what's going to happen. Or should I go and do a sauna and do a detox and cleanse the colon and fight it and get right after it? Well, what about your minerals that you haven't had for so long? They've already gotten past the gatekeepers, and they got past the gatekeepers like not yesterday. They got back past the gatekeepers a long time before that, and that's had some consequences. Not to mention there's other things going on. And so we're talking about, not only do they get past the gatekeeper, but they turn on buttons in the body. They turn on your immune system. And your immune system has all their own little intricate checks and balances, telling people to start, telling people to stop, telling people to not stop, telling people to start, telling them, turning them on and off. And then there's feedback loops in terms of ones that tell things to continue going, things that tell them to not continue going, to stop. Either way, those feedbacks get broken, whether they're telling them one thing or another. Those feedbacks get broken. And when they get broken, that has deeper impacts. So yes, we got to help with those minerals, get them back and replenish them. But what do we do from there? What happens with what I just said with that aspect? Or what about the other aspect of when, I guess, when it now breaks down the gut lining, where now that needs to be repaired? Or now that it also has pathogens that have now made some damage into the body, and we're exhausted and we're tired, and there's a cold sore, and there is a, let's say, what else, shingles, or there's an outbreak of itchiness or scratchiness, or there's just a major crash. And that crash can be just exhaustion. And you're sputtering, you're not getting better, your blood tests are normal, there's no signs of inflammation, your sedimentation rates are great, even C-reactive proteins probably somewhere low, and we're not really concerned about it right now. I know the levels are 0 to 3 from just even a lab range, and functionally speaking, we like to see that below 1, and even in many times below 0.5. So C-reactive protein is just a very, very small smoke signal that a lot of the times is avoided because you're looking too high. Smoke hasn't even gotten there yet. That's blood labs. That's where lab ranges. We're up in the clouds looking for all the smoke signals, and there are none. But yet there's like smoke signals coming directly off the trees and the branches. It's already started, and it's catching up. And I'm tired, and this is not working. And insurance, pays for stuff that doesn't get covered from what we need to do to help people in this way, and that's frustrating for the doctors and the patients because they're not getting the right information. It's really important. So anyways, rambled on that one, but it's really important in terms of what the adrenals do. And now what we want to do is we want to see this. We're getting a little glare. Now what I want to do is I want to talk about I want to talk about, you're supposed to see my board and we can't see it very well. Let's just go over here then. So we did have the adrenals. Actually, I'm gonna have to hold this. So I'm going to hold this for you guys. So where are we here? Okay, this is a little bit better. So we have here the adrenals, and basically I wanted to talk about reactive oxidative species, and that's another way to say inflammation. And so the other thing I want to talk to you about is the other impact when it gets past the gatekeepers is the role that plays on the mitochondria, because that's really home base where you got to go and fix. And if you don't do it in the right way, in the right sequence, with considering all the things that you need to consider, you can rev the engines too hard, just like you sent in, the troops before they were ready to be trained. Same idea. You got to go slow and meticulous, and you got to do it methodically, and you got to do it quick and effectively, and your mind has to be congruent with all those things. But that's really important because reactive oxidative species are an imbalance between the mitochondria producing antioxidants to nullify them and the free radicals to be produced in a large enough amount where it's healthy for our body to go over and create these chemical messages and get nitric oxide and produce that and be very ataxic and go and kill and dilate. You want swift Jedis getting in there and fixing and killing and doing all that stuff. And that's impacted with chronic stress and bad absorption and not having good proteins and the adrenals being tired and signaling this whole mess in the first place. It's really important. And when you add on that the genetic component, where you mean to say, like, if I have like a weak link in one area of my genes and I'm not able to detoxify and I got heavy metals and I have an MTHFR problem, which is already a 2-lane highway, and now I spill a car accident in the middle of the highway, now how am I supposed to move past that? But then a lot of patients will say, well, genetic has nothing to do with it. And I'm like, what do you mean it has nothing to do? It has everything to do with it. That's where one of your major breakdowns are. And that's where you need to focus in on. And well, my doctor said that I have MTHFR, and it was negative, so I don't have to worry. Or better yet, my doctor said I had MTHFR, and I just got to take methylfolate. It's all good, and everything's fine. How many people, by a show of hearts, would say that it's not fine? That when you do that, it doesn't work necessarily. That really causes big problems. Can't be in that position. I have to be a little bit lower. Sorry. Bad camera angles. The other thing we have here is actually, so the genetic component. So I did want to talk about the genetic component and inflammation. So what we're going to do is we are going to look at my board. We're going to have to come from over. All right. I'm so sorry. This is, as I try to get better, I get worse. Does that ever happen to you? As you try to get better, you get worse? But it's not really you're not getting worse. You're just getting better over time, if that makes sense. So anyways, so what we did is we circled all these red spots, which you're not going to be able to see. Shucks. This is terrible. Just when I thought I was doing a better job. Last week we had, I'm going to try and put this the other way now. When that happened, it fell back. So I said, I'm not going to let that happen this time. So what I'm doing is, you can tilt the board and not the phone. I can't tilt the board because it's on the wall. So anyways, what I was going to do is I was going to talk about the genetic component. I'm going to have to hold it like that. All right. So the genetic component is really important. So what we're looking at is, we're looking at MTHFR, which all of us talk about. I had a patient yesterday, and she didn't have the MTHFR, and as a result, looked awesome. But after that, there were all signs of a perfect storm where she had ++ on her ability to make methylcobalamin. She had a ++ on being able to make methionine. She had a ++ on being able to make SAMe. And then she had a ++ being able to regenerate the cell membranes. And I'll tell you what, she's not the only one. A lot of people have that. A lot of people, I'm sorry about this. A lot of people have that genetic problem. I'm so sorry. And she's not the only one. And what that means is, but they may actually have MTHFR. So what does that mean in English, right? What are you even talking about? What I'm talking about is the fact that you, if you have inflammation in your body and you have a predisposition for an enzyme not working at full capacity, that's going to result in an even further slowdown. And then if you put on top of that an environmental toxin like a heavy metal, which is very, very toxic, and you're not being able to reduce or make inflammation. Hey Margaret, hope you're doing well. I'm having some technical difficulties here, and it's been awful so far. If the content wasn't so good, I would definitely be an annoyed fan for sure. But I'd be like, you know what, Dr. Rosen, you're worth it because you're giving me good information and it seems like you care. Well, I do both, and I just need a better camera guy. And I'm talking to myself. So anyways, so now what we're looking at is that inflammation that impacts the gene that's already slow. I know it's just, Tracy, I have to move because my hand gets tired. It's like actually holding it on a weird angle, like you're in like a contraction of your muscle and you can't hold it the whole way like that. Anyways, I bet my Facebook Lives are even better with the bloopers version, with me just not being able to even shoot the picture. So now what we're talking about is just get the concept, because you're not going to see the enzymes perfectly, but basically what we talk about is flowing in a nice curve, and I picture like an engine, or I picture like a really sophisticated clock where gears are going one way and then it's spinning another gear other way, and there's a whole other thing happening over here. That's kind of what this is. This is what's going on, except it's only happening 1 billion times per second, and it's got to do a good job of reducing inflammation. And if it doesn't, you can experience not just a fatigue problem, but not going to the beach and being able to cool down. Or you can, all the things we talked about earlier, where that can happen and does happen, and you're not looking at the genetic component. And really, here's the moral of the story, because we were going to talk about how the adrenals were involved, but I'm going to fast forward to how you can impact it. And this is how you can, because that's really like, okay, at the end of the day, you're talking all this mumbo jumbo and these genetic genies and alphabet soup. What can I do about it? So I'm going to fast forward right to that. And basically, you just go in there and you dive in and you alter your genetic sequence and make it 8 lanes and take away the pluses and make them functioning perfectly. That's all you need to do. You need some water. Excuse me, really thirsty. That was a water break. So what I would suggest on that one, is it brings up a good point in terms of with the water breaks. Are you guys getting enough water breaks during your day? That's probably even better. Are you guys getting enough water breaks during your day? Because if your adrenals are tired and they're not balancing your electrolytes and they're maintaining your water and keeping you hydrated, and your sodium is low or your potassium is high or vice versa, and you're leaking your minerals, how are you going to be able to stand up and not feel lightheaded? Or how are you going to be able to get a stressor and get really anxious about it and not go into overwhelm and start to have a panic attack? How are you going to be able to control that? Well, you need to have all your troops on board, and you got to make sure that if you have genes that are 2 lanes highway, you can't go inside the genes and make them wider. You got to be able to do something about that. And so what you do about it is you help that gene work better. So you maximize the potential, and that has to do with dealing with stress. I am not going to be able to hold it for that long in that way. Oh my God. All right. We're going to have to do the best we can. So this is where we started with, and I got out of the hand. Now this is a lot better. So anyways, hi Linda. It's going too fast. It's too high. Sorry. So anyways, we were talking about the fact that you can't go inside the gene, and you can't make it a normal 8-lane highway. 2 lanes is if you have homozygous genes, and 4 lanes is if you have 4 lanes of highway. Sorry, 2 genes. Now I'm all flustered. 1 SNP for either your mom or your dad, plus minus heterozygous 4-lane highway. Minus minus, no SNPs, no altered genes, 8-lane highways. Plus plus, mom and dad, not or, mom and dad is plus plus, that is 2 lanes of highway. So doesn't mean you have problems, it just means that you're more genetically susceptible to the problems. But if you do have problems, now you're screwed. And you're not screwed in terms of you can't get it better, but you got a worse hand than they did. And that means that you've been dealing with stress for so long, and finally the proverbial straw broke the camel's back. And it's that perfect storm where they don't have to deal with as much stress as you do. But had they dealt with as much stress as you did, they probably would have been fatigued and tired a long time ago. But there's some genetic susceptibilities, and you're more likely if you get exposed to mold, you're more likely if you get exposed to chemicals or toxins, and you're more likely if you get a pathogen, you're more likely if you get whatever, you're more likely for your immune system to not work very well. But what does genetics have to do with it? I mean, that really kind of upsets me when I get a lot of people that say, yeah, I've already done genetics, or it's the missing link that I identify for them. And it's like, could it really be? Like, is it that easy? It's not that easy, because it's not only genetics. It's the perfect storm of the genetics with the environmental toxins and the shittier hand. You know, I mean, if you agree with that, or if it makes sense to you, let me see a show of thumbs, or happy faces, or hearts, or all those good things. There's all these different emojis that they have there. I don't use very much except the heart if I really like one, and a thumbs up. I never go yellow. I never go, you know, like the really mad with the cheeks all red, and then the yellow ones where, what other yellow ones are there? There's other yellow ones. I think I may have, maybe a crying one, I don't know, or sad one. It's interesting how we get these emotions in emojis now. So anyways, yeah, there they are. They're like, oh my goodness, it's like scream one. And then there's one with like a teardrop, and then a hothead. He's got a fever or something. He's sick. Anyways, so I'm rambling on. I like these versions of Facebook Lives a lot better, but I don't like having my arm held out. It will improve, and that's the thing, is if you're not keeping hydrated, you're not drinking your water, and good healthy water, you're not eating healthy nutrients, you're not balancing your stressors, you're not, you know, sweating the small stuff. When you do all those things, you give your body sort of a fighting chance. And then you got to put good, you know, energy into it in terms of, I got a full sign. Then you got to put good energy level in terms of thought processes, because those are really, really important things that people like mess up on. And if you don't have those proper thought processes on board, then none of that comes together. It's like kind of the glue that brings all that together. It's like you put it in, gotta go opposite. You put it in like a sort of like a stretchy bag, and you pull up on the handles and you just lock it in. That's what you do. That's what the philosophy is about, and it just sort of puts everything together in terms of gratefulness, you know, celebrations, breathing, getting good oxygen, just, you know, I guess it's the basics, and being you know, just enjoying those things, and not be go all the time. It's like refreshing to unplug. And that's another thing. What about just the cell phones? I mean, how much of us have these cell phone addictions where they're just constantly, I need more dopamine, or a text goes off and I got to answer it right away, and I now become conditioned. And if you would have rang a bell and had me salivate before this, I probably would have salivated like the Pavlovian dogs did when they were tested all that time ago, and they did the exact same thing, except they had to use dogs and salivation and a bell and a ding ding bell. We use texts now. We use phones, and it's boom boom boom. It's 1,000 times per second all the time. What kind of impact is that having on you? What kind of impact is EMFs having on you? And the fact that this signal drops out of the sky, and all of a sudden I'm talking, you know, I'm upset because it takes me 15 seconds to load something going up to the satellite, coming back down, and it might be 8 or 9 seconds. I saw Louis C.K. talk about that on a trip. He was talking about being in a plane, and they were flying home, and they just found out that they were able to have free Wi-Fi, and the person in front of him was like, you know, happy about it, and then all of a sudden, like, it, you know, it was a delay because it didn't come back right away, and the guy in front of him was like, oh, this sucks, like, this is ridiculous, and he was laughing about making fun of this, like, you know, 2 seconds ago he didn't even know this service existed, and then he was reminded that, hey, there's this thing that you can go for free and you can do this, and this was a while ago, and then not even before that, if you think about it, they're in a plane sitting in the air in a seat and going like upwards to 300 miles per hour, and you're getting a satellite that's coming down from the sky, and it's hitting your phone, and it's 4 seconds later. Like, just the preposterous nature of that. But that's kind of what's going on. Is I look at it from the fact that there's a signal, there's a cell phone, and there's a tower, and there's an EMF, and you can look at me like I'm crazy, but I'm just aware. And so does that mean I wear like a tinfoil hat, and I walk around with a tinfoil sword, and I look like a pirate with tinfoil? No, it doesn't mean that. It means that you just have to be realistic about it. And how can you minimize your exposure? And what can you do that are little hinges that swing big doors? Because it adds up over time. And if you have inflammation in your body, and you have genetic weak links that don't allow the genes to function at full capacity, then how are you going to be able to detoxify effectively? How are you going to be able to get exposures to pathogens and toxins? And how are you going to be able to make immune systems work properly, turn them on, turn them off? How are you going to be able to make ATP to be able to just have a little more energy, to make adrenaline and cortisol and all those things? How are you going to have the energy to do that? How is getting on even Cortef or hydrocortisone or prednisone or any of those things? Not to say that they're not needed. They are needed, but needed with the idea of sort of everything that I just said from here to here outwards. Like, what else can you do about it? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to fix the problem? What are you going to do? Like, okay, you're getting a Band-Aid, you're getting a painkiller, you're stitching up the area, but it's mangled. And they got past the gatekeeper, and they've been there for a long time, and it's broken down the body, and it's created an impact, and now you have to fix it, and you have to do it in the right order, and you have to do it in the right amounts, and you have to do a lot of the things right, and the brain has to be online too. All those things. Hopefully that's been helpful. I hope that those hearts are. I feel your heart, and I heart you right back. I hope that I do speak from the heart. In fact, actually, I get some people that, just to be personal, that they've been so jaded and they're so inflamed that when the inflammation, talking about inflammation, goes into the brain, it creates signals and it creates cytokines and it messes up neurotransmitters. And this is all secondary to pathogens and all the things we talked about. It creates and an immune battle, but the immune battle of the brain. And you have these things that create plaquing and amyloids. And actually, just not even a plug, I just started reading this. I'm glad I brought this up. It's called End Alzheimer's. And it is by the first program to prevent and reverse cognitive decline. Now, it's a great book, and I'm getting a lot of useful information, and it's really nice that it's done by an MD, because he talks about drugs. There's no drugs that have actually impacted Alzheimer's in any way, shape, or form that's been effective from the beginning. And it says it's not like cancer, because cancer, we know with the mutations and stuff like this, and the DNA and the programming, and I'm like, wait a minute. That's the same thing with cancer too. It's the same thing that's going on with Alzheimer's. It's the same thing that's going on with adrenal fatigue. It's the same thing that's going on with autoimmunities. It's the same thing that's going on with cardiovascular disease. It's the same thing. That's what Hans Selye's big laughing stock idea was that you have a natural general response by the body that is not as specific as you're saying for different things. It is in terms of, you have a virus, you have a chemical, you have a toxin. It's going to be some kind of different signaling system, some different kind of initial impact on the body. But it's the same generalized synchronicity that is kind of laughed upon, that requires cellular levels to work at full capacities. And now that we have the information with the genetics, and now that we have the information with just nutrition and toxins and all the things that we get exposed to, we have to be vigilant, because it's not getting any better. It's getting worse. It's getting worse in terms of nanoparticles, like how small things can be and how that gets past your absorption and signaling detectors, and it could hijack the cell. And who knows, I mean, that's kind of, you think about, like, if I was like a sci-fi writer, I probably could come up with a pretty good idea with a little bit of a embellishment on how, like, conspiracy it was. But to have that tool and harness that tool to be able to hijack your system and your firing, if it's not happening at the government level, it's not. It's happening at the microscopic level. It's happening at the pathogen level, because these guys are smart. They're like, send a signal over here and put them in the other direction. Let's exit out of Dodge. The guys up top told us we got an onset coming on. We got to get out of here and we got to avoid detection. Let's take off our cell wall. Let's go inside the cell and none of them can see us. Our cloaking devices are on, and we're in the matrix. We were talking about being in the matrix and not having ever any immunizations. That was pretty cool. I think that's Sarah, you had said that. But anyways, so that's what's going on at the microscopic level, and we need to reclaim that. And so with that book, I feel it's like that's the same thing that's going on with cancer. That's the same thing that's going on with anything. Like, you need to think of it in terms of systems, and you need to think of it in terms of inflammation. And that's what the inflammation is all about, and the genetic component. And I don't even know, honestly, I don't even think they're doing the genetic stuff. They're not. So I was kind of like, reading through it, and they do part of the genetic stuff. And that's what I wanted to talk to you today about. So they do part of the genetics. So what they do, though, is they're talking about, it's not on here, but it's ApoE. So ApoE is one of the most researched genes that, this is just research. This is peer-reviewed journals that talk about, 60% of cases of Alzheimer's have a plus, and maybe 40% have a plus minus, or even 80% have a plus. I should have done my research, but I know that the ApoE gene is implicated in terms of, plus. Is going to be a high likelihood. So how can we avoid that? Or how can we create a preventative maintenance? Well, you know what? This person didn't even have the MTHFR one. So I know this. If they went for, this is like why I do these, because this is not just for me, but this is for just in general. If they have an MTHFR, and they do a blood test, which is a quick test, and they don't have it, don't worry, you don't have any problems. You have MTHFR plus minus, you don't have to worry that much. It's really only about getting a little more methylfolate. You have a plus, now just take methylfolate forever. And that's it, that's all. That's all you have to worry about. But this person didn't even have that methylfolate. So that was wrong to begin with, number one. Number two, this person didn't even have MTHFR. So if that person was just tested with a blood test, MTHFR is negative, now you don't even have to worry about methylfolate. You can just do folic acid. Now you can just do the least possible healthy thing in the world and not have to worry because you don't have the susceptibility. Well, why don't you just continue to do the healthy positive thing anyways? But sometimes it doesn't work out that way. It's like, okay, you don't have to worry now. You can go ahead and eat gluten. You shouldn't be really eating gluten anyways because of the pesticides and the glyphosates and the insulin surges and all that stuff. So that causes a huge problem. So I guess the last thing I wanted to say is that the ApoE gene, it ultimately needs to be balanced with the same way that we balance all these other things that need to be balanced. The same way that we end Alzheimer's, and the same way that we end cancers, and the same way that we end adrenal fatigue and mitochondrial fatigue. Do you ever truly end it? That's a common question. And let's just say this. I think you never, ever end it, because it's when you're 6 feet deep, you end it. But when you're still alive and you're winning the quality of life battle, and you're winning the my life is meaningful battle, and you're winning the I have deep relationships, and I have loving children, and I have a loving spouse, and I'm not alone, or I have friends, and I have a social network, and I feel energetic, and I like to maybe be active, and I feel healthy in my own skin. I may not be 102 pounds and I fit into my skinny jeans, but I'm happy with what I am. I'm happy that I have energy. When you have those things, and you have to not worry about what foods you're going to be eating every night, and is it going to cause problems? Are you going to be up to 2 in the morning? Are you going to get a stressor again and just start to get panicky, and then you can't fall asleep right away, and then you're in bed and you can't turn it off, and then you're rumbling, and then you do wake up, but then go to bed early, but then you're waking up, or you get up in the morning, you're exhausted, and now I got to go to this this shitty job, and now I got to do all these things that I have 1,001 different things to do, and I have to start with number one. I mean, when you're just, and then I got to get on my phone, and then I got to go into text mode, and then and then I don't have time to sit down, put my feet on the ground, and eat a healthy meal. And then I'm going to drink a lot of caffeine and stuff like that. And then I just don't have time to exercise. It's like even me just saying it, the cadence gets faster and faster and faster and faster. And it's sort of all the same thing, but now we're looking at the genetic component and how inflammation can't get turned off. And it all, goes along with, balancing blood sugar. I mean, in this young lady's case, she didn't have MTHFR, but she had a lot of great things going. And that means that I have the motivation now. Like, I can be like, crap, I have, the predisposition for being, having Alzheimer's. I have the predisposition for having Alzheimer's. I have plus minus, and there is Alzheimer's on my mother's side, and that's where you get your mitochondrial DNA from. And so what do you have to do is you have to balance your blood sugar, and you can't cheat as much as you'd like to, and you have to be dialed in more. But it's a win-win because you feel better and you have more energy and you're going out socially and you're not too tired and you get up and you fall asleep and you feel energetic. What's the trade-off? I mean, the trade-off is you feel better and you don't feel as crappy. So I hope that's helpful for you guys. Lizzie, you're welcome. I hope you're doing well as well. Think about you in our talk, and I do think I hope you're doing well. Anyways, so what else was I going to say? So I guess if there's any questions, it just kind of it really impacts me when I see people that are suffering and they're not getting the help that they need. So I think that's really, really important. And I had a good consult with someone today, and the Dutch test, and this is a good question that I saw. I just wanted to raise this question, where cortisol levels are high in terms of your metabolized cortisol. They're super, super high. And your free cortisol levels are low, super, super low. How is that? The free cortisol represents 1 to 3% of the circulating cortisol in the body when it's in the body, and up to let's say 1%, as much as little as 1%, and 99% is bound. Binding globulins, and globulins depends on having enough proteins and absorption, and globulins are used up when you have immune system problems. So if you're not binding them and you're taking more hormones, there's not enough thyroid binding globulins or taxicabs to take them to different places. Or if you're taking estrogen, there's way too many taxicabs, and now thyroid can't get out of the taxicabs. I mean, these are the things that happen. And so anyways, with this patient, it was one thing after the next with all of that stuff. And, it's all that can be helped. And you can do things about that. But it requires, putting all the puzzle pieces together. And insurance really should pay for that. I don't know why it doesn't. But ultimately, it's a reality that if you want to have good health in today's healthcare age, it's about looking outside of what your insurance covers. That's the bottom line. As far as looking at connecting the dots, looking at the genetic testing, looking at the perfect storm of your organic acids and environmental toxins, and looking at your diet and looking at your brain health, and how many gatekeepers have gotten past the gate. Or how many people have gotten past the gatekeepers? I mean, that's kind of like the problem that I see nowadays. And the other thing too is it comes down to how bad is the problem? Because I talk to a lot of people that have problems, and it's hurtful to I feel it. I really feel bad when people have health issues and they've gone down the wrong roads and they spent lots of money already, and that didn't work. And maybe it's just not supposed to be in the cards for me. And I'm not going to get better. No one can figure it out. I don't believe that. I believe that it can be figured out. And a lot of it figuring out has to do with you. And with you, with aligning a lot of the things that have to be dusted off and be sort of like re-shined up and remotivated, and like, yeah, those are things that I want to do, that I need to do. I only live once. I only live once, and I'm not getting any younger, and it's time for me to get healthy, and it's time for me to get resourceful, be coachable, and be committed and decisive. Those three things. So anyways, I really rambled on. I almost think I went for an hour. There was a lot of moments in there where where the hand was crampy and the thing was tilted, but I think I brought it together. I think I really wrapped it up and made up for what the content had, made up for how bad the cameraman was. I'm gonna have to fire that cameraman and get a new guy. Anyways, if there's any questions, I would love to answer them. I know it's been a long one. I have to scroll down, and this is what happened last time. When I scrolled, it tilted the camera downwards and boom, it fell. And I still haven't had the glass replaced yet. And the glass, I wish I could do a video of the glass, because there's like this 3 glass cracks. So I ended up doing this, sacrificed my phone for you guys. Yup, MTHFR, that's not really a question, but that was a long time ago. In the middle of a crash, someone's in the middle of a crash, sorry. Maria, I hope that that was helpful, because that was for you. Oh, I didn't finish my concept, did I? That's what we were talking about, sorry. So it's a long day, definitely a long day. So anyways, we were talking about when it's really high on the cortisol metabolized and really low on the free cortisol. We were talking about how we make hormones, and only 1% of the free cortisol is only 1% of that free cortisol is available, and it, maybe 2 or 3% might be available, but that gets impacted with. Sorry, I get a little bit farther here. That gets impacted with when you have different types of medications too, and that gets impacted with disruptors, estrogen disruptors, PCBs, that gets disrupted there. And when you have that disruption, that's going to cause what we just talked about. It's going to impact the binding hormones, and depending on what's going on with hormones in general, are you taking extra hormones? Are there not as much hormones? What do those tests show? What are you doing? What type of nutrition stuff are you doing? I mean, you got to look at that whole clinical picture, and if there's too much, and even if they're in levels, let's say the binding globulin was in level and the other one was in level, and you got to think about it like, okay, well, maybe they are in level, but they're not just being utilized. It's bad quality hormone. There's not a lot of minerals. There's a lot of immune reactivities. I'm not absorbing a lot of this. I'm burning through a lot of engine and ATP on other sides of the fence. I got a lot of things going on here, and this is not working as well as I could. All I can see is that we're using up and we're making a lot of cortisol. It's just not getting inside the cell. And that has a lot to do with genetics, a lot. And that's what we talk about with trying to repair that cell membrane. I mean, I'm all about repairing cell membrane. It comes down to repairing cell membrane. That's what it really comes down to. But then it comes down to, positive energy, positive frequency, positive vibrations, supportive family members, comes down to all those things. And if those things aren't aligned, it doesn't matter if the cortisol was high on the metabolized and low on the free, and one's 1%, 2%, 3%, the other one's 97%, and this is out of my body, and my blood tests say that they're normal and that everything's fine, and I don't feel normal. Well, everything's not fine. There's something else going on. It's not getting inside the cell. You're not repairing the cell membrane. There's not enough good nutrition on board. What's going on with the vibration and frequency and energy and the support and everything else in between. It's really important. But to answer your question from the Dutch perspective, it's all about the fact that it's not being utilized for a reason. One of the interesting enzymes, 5-alpha, I got this out of the inference today, and that's the great thing. When you go through these tests more and more and more and more, you get more insights on these tests, and you bring it back to the genetic component and what the person's dealing with. And the insight I got on this one was 5-alpha is upregulated when it has to break down cortisol. And it also happens to, be upregulated when it makes your hormones more androgenic. Especially for female, that's not good, because now you're becoming more aggressive and maybe acne and maybe more oily skin and maybe more irritable and maybe more, male pattern baldness or just even hair loss. And maybe there's a aromatization problem. And maybe there's not, but maybe those are the things that we need to consider, and that's important too. And then how does it get broken down in terms of phase 1 and phase 2? Those are really important things as well. But that 5-alpha enzyme, once it gets regulated and it gets upregulated, it's going to produce more testosterone. And if you're taking DHEA for any amount of time, that's spilling over, and that's not doing any good for you. That's causing more problems with your receptors. Now you're spilling more hormone that's more potent, and you're not breaking down, and now you have more stuff competing for binding sites that aren't available, and there's nowhere to bind to. And I'm taking more thyroid, I'm taking more, cortisol, I'm taking more adaptogens, I'm doing this, that, and the other, and it's not fixing it. It's not fixing it because it's not fixing the problem. Why? It won't fix the problem, it needs to fix the problem. And it's everything that we just talked about. And it needs to be done diligently, and it needs to be done, everything needs to be together for that to happen. I hope I answered that question. We got a little bit sidetracked. Can you hit the board on the phone? Can you, oh, you said that before, yeah. That's how far back I am. Hey, Margaret. Perfect now, Joel, don't move. All these questions. I'm located in Boca Raton. Hi, Linda. Photo and post. Love the genetics. Thanks for being. You're welcome. I hope you're doing well. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. I used to celebrate Canada Thanksgiving. How quickly do you deplete electrolytes once you stop drinking water, or how quickly do you feel it? I mean, it's right away. I mean, remove your electrolytes and you'll get dehydrated, you'll get a headache. And I mean, I don't know how quick, I mean, within hours, depending on how dehydrated you were before and depleted and stressed and inflammation. I mean, it really depends, but it doesn't take long. It's, I hope that helps you with understanding. Good there. It was good there. Do you know if there is correlation of adrenal fatigue and lymphedema, lipedema? Yeah, I mean, anything that's watch this video again. I just spoke about it in your fairness, that was a long time ago you asked that question. So, if there was one culprit to deplete the adrenals, what would it be? If there was one culprit, I would be out of business. That's what would it be. It would be too easy, but it would be blood sugar. That's the easiest one. But you don't live in a vacuum, so it's not just one factor. Okay, so what now? Recommendations. I think I had some pretty good recommendations. I think I did. I think the whole video was recommendations. I mean, those were good. Again, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt because this was a long time ago. You're very welcome, though. Thank you, Teresa. Annie. That's where I'm at. It's hard for me. Don't lose hope, Annie. It's hard for me to know when you ask these questions because if I read them when they're happening, then I will lose already scatterbrain of what I'm trying to say even more. And it's the end of the day in my defense. But I do a lot of hard work to try to make sure that I don't have that. So anyways, that's it. It looks, Maria, you're laughing because you knew I forgot to answer your question. Anyways, I hope that's it. That was a real long one, but I hope you really enjoyed it. Annie, I do suggest minerals. I like to say what's called superfoods. I suggest stuff that's going to help you digest your food better, stuff that's going to help you get fuel inside the cell, repair the cell membranes, those types of things. Like specifically, it's hard to say, like, why aren't you saying the real name? Because I've said them before, like phosphatidylcholine. We said that a lot of times. Superfoods, and I don't want it to be a pitch fest, so to speak, in terms of take this supplement and that supplement and this supplement and that supplement, because that's not what I'm about. I'm about more getting to the root cause of the problem and seeing where it fits in and custom designing your program based on those things. That's what I want to happen. So it's as good a recommendation as I can give you. Annie, I think that's it. So again, guys, that's a real long one, and I got to pick up my daughter from soccer practice, but it doesn't even start till 8:30 these days. So that means, which is right down the street, but it means they're done at 9:30 and 9:45. So get home at 10 and left at 5. So long days. So I need to balance too, just like you guys. And and that's where you have to replete your energy, get hydrated, unplug, get good rest, and get that mindset going, and then plug back in to those things that motivate you and bring you more energy. And that's why I get energized, and you got to figure that out with your life too. I guess that's the moral of the story. The moral of the story is figure out what energizes you, and figure out what is not a chore to have to put it all together for. And that's really your authentic self and what it is that makes you passionate. And if it happens to be giving back, and you do it for selfish reasons, because you do it to make it feel good, and you're helping someone. So dig down deep and see, if you don't get yourself fixed and you don't do it now in this one world, in this one lifetime that you live in, if you don't do it for yourself, who needs you there? Does a child need you there? Does a parent need you there? Does a spouse need you there? Does the community need you there? Do people need you there? Like, who are you not serving when you're not serving yourself? And that's a really important one. And when are you going to finally do something about it? Because this is one world that we live in, one lifetime that we live in, unless you believe in other stuff, which is a whole other story. So anyways, guys, that's it. Hope you guys got a lot of value, and I'm signing off, and have a wonderful, wonderful Tuesday night. Take care. Bye.